Hello, everyone. I'd like to warmly welcome you to our first MSM Think-in. It's a minute after the hour, so we have a lot to cover. We're going to get started, and I'm sure other participants will be joining us shortly. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be available tomorrow on our website. We will set aside some time at the end of the webinar for a Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentations, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will make sure to address them at the end. In this Think-in series, we will discuss the first of many sessions that we will be holding monthly. We'll be discussing one of the most important issues in international education. Today, we will be focusing on several of the concerns faced by international students and share best practices that will help you in addressing these issues. Before we get started, allow me to introduce myself. I came to the US as an international student almost 40 years ago to study electrical engineering. While making new friends wasn't easy, feeling comfortable in the classroom was harder. Language barriers, cultural differences, and new style of academic delivery played a big role in determining my academic success. While I had no trouble in math, chemistry, and other science courses, I had to drop my psychology course within the first week of my freshman year as I couldn't take notes while listening to the lecture. It was just too fast for me. This experience has led to a career that is close to my heart, which is promoting international education to a new generation of learners, while working closely with partner universities to design and implement new programming and student support services. For the past 27 years, I've held several leadership positions dedicated to growing and retaining the international student population at partner institutions. I specialize in partnership development, organizational leadership, strategic planning, global operations, in addition to international student recruitment. Most importantly, my focus now is on developing and supporting new partnerships with colleges and universities across the US of all types and all sizes. As an advocate of international education, I am an active member of several industry organizations, including NAFSA, English USA, the American International Recruitment Council, AIRC, and the Association of International Education Administrators, AIEA. I am currently serving as the chair for NAFSA Region 11, the New England region. And in my day job, I'm the vice president of MSM Global Marketing Office in the US. At MSM, we connect higher education institutions to students from all over the world through our global recruitment solutions. Apart from establishing institutions to build a global brand and reach out to various student markets, we also aim to help retain international students by improving students' experience. In line with this endeavor, we designed the webinar where we can gather industry experts to allow them to share their knowledge and experience in international education. Today, we will discuss integrating international students into the classroom by looking into the opportunities and best practices for the next normal. Recruiting and enrolling international students is only the first step of many. Institutions need to help them feel comfortable in their surroundings, in the classroom, on campus, and in the community. This will help international students weather whatever problems may arise throughout their studies and eventually lead them to successfully completing their degree programs. With the pandemic making learning experience even more complicated, it is important to discuss how institutions can extend assistance to international students who are not only dealing with unique issues surrounding overseas studies, but also anxious about the ongoing health crisis. Without further ado, allow me to begin our first Think-in event. I would like to thank our presenters today, Dawn Sherman, Dan Lesho, and Paul Foster, for joining us. During this Think-in, we will hear from them and their experiences in integrating international students into the classroom. I will allow them to introduce themselves now. And please move the slides to the presenters' slide. Dawn, if we can start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. I am Dr. Dawn Sherman, and currently I am a Dean of Continuing Education at Post University, but spent many years working with international students, particularly running pathway programs in the organization of that. And I worked for 3 different organizations in my past. So I've worked with Shorelight, EC Higher Education, and Study Group. I've also been in higher ed for about 30 plus years. Worked in student affairs to start, academic affairs thereafter, and have taught undergrad and graduate. I've taught cohort classes of graduate students and have also taught integrated classrooms as well. So I'm glad to be part of this conversation and to be working along with my colleagues here of Paul and Dan presenting and May, who is our moderator, and look forward to sharing some of our ideas with all of you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Slides, please. If you can advance the slide to the presenter's slide, that would be great. And then we'll have Dan introduce himself next.
Thanks, May. Hello, everyone. Very glad to be joining you today for this webinar. Thank you, May, for inviting us here. And my name is Dan Lesho. Have about 30 years of experience in higher ed, both in abroad and in the United States. Most of my experience has been for pre-matriculation programs like ESL programs, academic preparation programs in large universities in California and in private universities as well. I'm currently with Notre Dame de Namur University in their admissions department, helping domestic and international students find their way to Notre Dame de Namur. And yeah, looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dan. Paul?
Good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Paul Foster. I am in Billings, Montana, and it's a beautiful fall day here in Montana. I am the Executive Director of the Office of International Studies and Outreach at MSU Billings. I've been here for about 10 years. I am very lucky because I am working about 100 meters from where I was born. So that's something that I'll talk about in the presentation today. But I've worked in higher education. I am a specialist in Slavic languages. I've been mostly on the faculty side, but here at MSUB, I lead our Office for International Studies. Thank you.
I think I've done my introduction, May, so I don't know if I can say more about this.
Dawn, we'll start with you. So let's go to begin our chat. In your opinion, Dawn, and based on your experience, what general gaps and concerns are there in international student integration?
I think that some schools do things extremely well. Some probably could get a little bit better. And then there's everybody that's probably somewhere on that range. But there are several things I think that we need to address with international students. And one in the first one, and I'll spend some time talking about this in a minute, is really about giving them the information they need before they arrive. You know, sometimes we do a great job once they're here, or we have an orientation, or we spend a lot of time in the classroom talking with them. But I think that there's an opportunity to do a lot more before students get here and to be working with our agents and recruiters in other countries. So I'll go into that a little bit more. Often another issue, and I'm sure that you all have seen this, is that faculty are not always prepared to work with international students. I think our international faculty are probably in a great position to be able to help support that. But a lot of faculty just don't know where to turn, don't know what to do, don't understand the cultural differences, may get frustrated with students who are always late or who, you know, just aren't paying attention or afraid to talk in class or whatever that may be. So that's another issue. I think sometimes faculty are surprised as well by the limited English some students might have, or that are perceived limited English. And then how do we deal with that in the classroom? How do faculty help students who may be hesitant to speak up because their English is limited, or faculty who may not think that the students are expressing themselves clearly when it's really due to language. So that's another issue I think we could spend more time with. A large one that I've seen is academic integrity and academic honesty, right? Our students sometimes from some countries just think it's the best thing to do is to take other people's work and use it because you're recognizing someone else as being more skilled or having those credentials. And that has been a huge issue. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as well too. Another idea around the faculty is helping them understand where those resources are on campus. And the international student offices are a great place for that to happen. But also the teaching and learning centers through the faculty area are often a really good source of information as well, too. And then finally, I think sometimes our student services and student affairs teams are not always up to target on what to expect from international students and understanding the cultures of these students and how can they go about that and know that they may need a little bit different kind of attention than they've been used to giving. So I think the schools that have a lot of international students have been doing it for a long time are probably in a great position to share some best practices. But a lot of schools are just trying to dip their toe into this and a little bit uncomfortable, not so sure where to turn and so forth. So student affairs staff may also need support for any of us that can help support them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead. I'll save
Yeah.
my comments for the next section.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover. We could be talking about this for actually an entire day, not just an hour. When should these integration activities start in terms of students? And what are the best practices really to ensure successful integration?
Sure. As I said, I think it really needs to start pre-arrival. We started off when I started building one of the pathway programs, is thinking we're going to spend a lot of time talking about some of these issues in our ESL courses because all students will be in those courses as part of a pathway. Then we started saying, well, maybe we should include some of this in orientation. And we planned out a very originally 2 to 3 day orientation and then realized that that just was not going to be enough. We needed to extend that. So we ended up planning out a full week of orientation so we could get a lot of information in there and get students ready for the classroom. Beyond that, we started to say, why are we waiting until they get here? You know, they're coming and we're trying to rush everything into a week while they're getting acclimated and then starting classes a week later. So let's put some of this into pre-arrival. So we started working with our agents and our recruiters, and they started to do some pretty sophisticated pre-arrival orientations, webinars to get students ready. And in the large cities, particularly like Beijing and Shanghai, where we had a lot of students coming, they would hold in-person seminars for several hours and to help them understand what's to come. And specifically within all of these things that we were doing, we inserted academic affairs information, particularly around academic honesty, what an American classroom is like, how students participate in the classroom, what that faculty role is about. And we wanted to have specifically the agents and the recruiters in country share some of that information because we thought that it would be better coming from them. And then when they came over here, we could reinforce that as opposed to them hearing it for the first time from all of us on site. So that was one thing we did. We also created webinars for any students that were coming in. So they could join us and we could do some of this from where we were so they could meet some of the staff. I also did a lot of webinars for families. And that was really helpful too, for them to understand, and a lot of it had to be through translation, but to have them understand what was expected of their student and how it would be different so that they could also support their students. I also did a lot of just Zoom and Skype calls with parents and families to try to help them acclimate as well. So I really think a lot of this can start in country before the students arrive, and then we're reinforcing, not teaching it for the first time, and when they're bewildered in their first few days when they're here.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to try to reach out to them while they're home, in the comfort of their home, in their own language, with the support that they have around them. And that way, when they arrive to campus, it's not a first time that they're hearing all of this, which would also help them in really now saying, oh, yes, I remember hearing this and I could find out now exactly where to go to get this help. So once the students arrive to campus, how much of that information is repeated? What other information needs to be now given now that they're actually physically on campus? And actually, more importantly, when do you start again? Do you let them, do you greet them at the airport and ensure there's something on the weekend, or do you leave them on their own on the weekend and then do something? Because, that first impressions make a big difference, and then getting them, getting to them, I guess, sooner than later is actually very helpful and important. So from your experience, if you can share what you've done.
Sure. I think, again, as May's saying, arrival, I think, is just as important. It's that first impression, right? You get one chance to get a first impression. We used to meet students at the airport, no matter the schools that I was working with and the pathway programs that I was running. When I was at Auburn Global, and I know I have a former colleague on the call, thank you, Beth, we would run our Auburn University buses to the airport and back. We would meet the students there. We wanted them, as soon as they came through their immigration check-in, that we were there with signs and banners and information about how to get on the bus, to the point where finally, at one year, the airport security came up and said, you really can't bring this many balloons in here. You can't bring this many signs in here. You're kind of going overboard. You can be there with your clipboards, but you really need to tone this down. So unfortunately, we had to do that. But that was the kind of welcoming we wanted. We had, a team of about 6 or 8 people there. We wanted them to be warmly greeted. And then on every bus, we would put a staff member on the bus. We had an hour and a half when we were at Auburn University from Atlanta Airport. So we would have a staff person on the bus. We would have sometimes other students who spoke languages to translate, and we could use that time to get to know students and to visit them and so forth. And importantly, as I said, I think a really comprehensive orientation helps them get set. It gives them that time to acclimate to where they are, to get caught up with their sleep, to get them thinking straight before they jump into the classroom. So we did a full week-long orientation, and we made sure that at least half of the day was dedicated to academics. We wanted to bring in faculty, assistant provost, whoever that may be, to talk about academics, but our staff also did it. And we spent a lot of time on academic honesty, the classroom experience, syllabus, all kinds of things, so that they wouldn't be surprised when they got into that classroom. It's still going to be a shock. We're talking culture shock, but they wouldn't be totally surprised. The other thing that we did at orientation is we realized that we were sharing a lot of information over an hour or two and didn't have time to unpack that. So what we always did is saved a half hour after every session and had our orientation leaders, many who were former international students or had moved on to the university. We broke them into small groups of 10 or less students with an orientation leader to kind of talk through in a half an hour what just happened and to process it a little bit more so that they could absorb it. Because just talking to somebody for an hour or two with all this information in another language can be really challenging. So we tried to unpack it as much as we could after those sessions, and that seemed to work. Another important thing, I think, is to walk them through the academic facilities on campus. Let them see where the classrooms are. Where's the tutoring center? All of those things. Once you see it, it's easier to get back to it. The other thing we just wanted to make sure is that whenever we're giving them important information, we gave it to them in writing. So if we wanted to have something about academic honesty, we gave them something in writing so they could go back later and read it, refer to it, think about it, process it. Just another way to help with their learning. And then finally, one thing that we did around orientation was that we invited recruiters and agents to come over and participate in orientation. It was really helpful for some agents and recruiters to arrive and be here when the students arrived. So, they saw them off in their country and now they're here welcoming them abroad. That also brought continuity to this whole process. And they could help with us with understanding. And they also got to learn the university and how we do things. So for instance, really quickly, I had some students who didn't want to live in our campus housing that we required them to do. And so when they got there, they went and found apartments and they came to me and said, we already have apartments. We don't want to live in your housing. And I said, well, you have to live in our housing. And they said, well, our agent said we didn't have to. And I said, great, well, your agent will be here in the morning and let's ask the agent what they told you, okay? So all of a sudden, suddenly they were in our housing and they didn't push their apartments. So, but that's just another way to kind of make it seamless, help these students and to bring those recruiters. We also had a very extensive advising program, and I'm not going to go into that now, but if you ever want to talk about how to advise students and help them, I'd be glad to share what we did. It wasn't ideal, but it worked extremely well. I'll end there, Meg, because I'm sure I went over my time.
Thanks, Dawn. Let's look beyond arrival and really talk about the classroom that we've started, this discussion around and the importance of supporting students while they're in their studies to ensure that they actually make it to the end and complete their degree programs. So some of the examples or best practices in terms of integrating students in the classroom, if you can share some of those would be great.
I think one for me was to try to learn their names. And that wasn't easy because I have a little bit of a hearing issue. So learning their names and hearing all of those sounds were not easy. But learning their names, particularly, I mean, if you're in a group of 300 students or in a classroom, it's really difficult. I'm not sure you can, but if you're in a group of 20, 30, 40 students, try to learn those names, try to enunciate and make them feel welcome. And I think that's really important. And then the obvious things of speaking slow. You know, we all tend to talk fast sometimes, and to stop and have to always be thinking. And I try to remind myself, like every 3 or 4 minutes, talk slowly, you know, bring myself back. I even wrote myself notes to say that once in a while. Also important was to learn the culture and to help assimilate the students, because their cultures are different. For instance, I had a group of students that came about 10 to 15 minutes late to class. So about the third time I said, okay, after class, what's going on? Well, you know, we can just come when we want to. And no, it doesn't work here. And I said, you're going to have to change that behavior. This is why it's disruptive for the class and so forth. And of course, the door in my classroom would bang as well because of the way it came. So it was a big announcement when they came walking in the door. So we had to spend time with that. So I think being really clear about arrival time, being clear about what the attendance policy is and what's going to happen if they're not following that. So I think we need a lot of patience in the beginning, but I think that at some point that you have to put the foot down and say, this is what's going to happen, and you're losing points or whatever that may be. Being really clear about homework assignments and the things that they need to be engaged in. And I found that I think I'm being clear sometimes, and I found out that I wasn't always being clear. So again, sometimes putting that in writing, making sure the Blackboard or whatever system you're using is clear, dates are clear, expectations are clear, to kind of break down the cultural and the language barrier. And then spending time with academic honesty, you know, and I've had to use the policy, and I've had to give out zeros on assignments. I had a class one time, about 25 international students, and 3 of them turned the same homework. And like, I wouldn't notice 3 out of 25, right? So I spent some talking with them. And then the other thing that we did along the way for very difficult classes is we embedded tutors in those classes. And then the tutors could then hold tutoring sessions thereafter and completely understand what the faculty member was going through. And that was highly effective for us as well, too.
Before we go on, we do I guess we have a question, we'll answer it later, but I'd like you to keep that in mind. Someone has asked if we can talk and address strategies around graduate students, because they are definitely different. Mm-hmm. Undergraduates, they're 18-year-olds or barely 18-year-olds coming in, maybe leaving home for the first time. And graduate students a little bit more mature, might have had work experience, might have never had work experience, going straight on, and how those would be different. Housing may not be available and things like that. And, you know, again, mm-hmm. Their experience in the classroom. So keep that in mind for after when we get into the Q&A. Instead of moving on to the faculty and training, Dawn, mm-hmm. with you, I'm going to jump to Dan, because Dan is going to also share with us a little bit about faculty and staff engagement. And we all know integrating, again, students into the classroom is extremely critical to their academic success. But what about faculty? Because I think it's a two-way, street, just like anything else. We do want to prepare our students at the same time. We want to prepare the entire campus, starting at faculty to the staff to, again, the entire community, even around the campus. So Dan, it would be great if you can share some of your ideas and thoughts and best practices around faculty and staff engagements of what you've done in the past.
Sure. And this, a lot of this comes from my own experience and from my peers as well, who I've been able to go out and kind of survey as well for other reasons. But I think the first thing to understand is you are going to get a huge spectrum of when it comes to faculty, from highly cooperative and your champions to folks mm-hmm. who simply just don't want another thing to be thinking about, in terms of their class. So I think that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, in that you're not always going to get, you're not always going to get 100% cooperation. Some faculty are very busy; they have other things on their minds, But I think, having said that, you do want to identify your champions, and I think that's an important thing to do. Identify who those faculty are that love international education, that really believe in it, and you really want to identify those people and focus on them. My experience, and I may touch on this a little bit later, is just making sure when you do have an opportunity to have an orientation session or a training, to make it very hands-on, very practical, very authentic, and so that you're almost role-playing these situations and scenarios with faculty. I might touch on this a little bit later, even with students too, as well, because that's I think an important and similar approach. So I think what other things I've seen lately is also getting buy-in from faculty on early warning systems that can be used to identify students who might be at risk. Again, that's not easy. Getting buy-in for a faculty member to be, to go in and press a button on, I'm noticing late arrivals, as Dawn mentioned, or I'm noticing missing assignments, or I'm noticing. I think that one's really key because, that is really where faculty can help. If you can get buy-in on those types of things, I think that's really important. But again, what I've always found is, identifying those faculty are going to be cooperative, and again, collecting syllabi from them, collecting, keeping in touch with them and getting feedback from them. I think this is something that ESL programs have been doing for a long time, and they continue to do, and that is, do you have a good repository of syllabi that are current and up to date, so you really do know what's going on in the culture that's developing in your university.
Thanks, Dan. As educators and professionals in the field, we do understand or are very aware of the difficulties that are caused by language gaps. But could you share some best practices that go beyond really addressing language gaps and talk about integration into the classroom from your experience and your point of view?
Sure. Well, again, I think EAP, or English for Academic Purposes programs, have been doing these things for a long time. I think they continue to get better at these what called paralinguistic skills, and we've all known for a long time that might be 70% language, 80% language, but 20% kind of what those things were that Dawn was mentioning, which is follow through, showing up on time, really going, reading a syllabus very carefully, in the course, the group work and interaction is very important, and even more important for us, and kind of understanding those differences between the students' home academic culture and the culture at the university. Again, the approach that I've taken in the past is really just making sure to model those experiences for students, those group work experiences, those the relationship building with faculty, and modeling them in a way where it's not always positive. That sometimes they will meet a difficult person and someone who's hard to communicate with, and a lot of what we do is how do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? How do you handle those tough situations? So, and then also, again, going back to the paralinguistic skills, did you what was that? What was that interaction like? Did you get the person's name? Did you get an email? Did you send a thank you letter? I mean, did you do the things that we all kind of naturally do to build those relationships? So, in terms of going beyond language, those are things I think are really important. I think develop, crafting those very authentic experiences for students is something I think ESL programs continue to get better at.
Thanks again. So mental health is not something new, but I think frequently overlooked as a potential cause to some of the behavior, the issue, the performance in class, and the academic success of these international students. How best to address them, especially now with the pandemic, with the past year of online learning, and how do we really identify them and catch them before it's too late, before we lose that student and have them return home or drop out of their academic experience when their parents have spent a lot of time, energy, and money and resources to really support them. How do you support them, on campus, and again, identify these issues before it's too late?
Sure. Yeah, well, again, this was really what's kind of sparked my interest, and that was, working with students who have found themselves in academic difficulty, and across the board, it really was a matter of, or usually it was a matter of social isolation. It was a student who had just retreated into his or her own kind of world there, and had not, oftentimes, had not visited an advisor, had not gone to an academic support office, had not gone to a writing center, and this was very common among the students that I surveyed and have worked with in the past. So, I think that those, we're all we plan the events, we do all of these things, but now I think now what I've seen is people really tracking to make sure that those students are coming, and again, the early warning systems are so important, because someone can have a really bad first semester and it's too late. The GPA is such that that student is going to have a really hard sledding getting back up to the point where they need to have a certain GPA to be able to continue and not be DQ'd. So, and I think, yeah, again, the social isolation is the part that I just have seen. I think our connectivity, our amazing connectivity that we have right now, works in pros and cons, works for us and against us. I think we can use that to help students stay engaged. But the other times, we realize that students have the ability to kind of retreat. They're able to connect with people at home just fine. They're able to do these things, and so they're not really engaging the way that we want them to. So, and of course, with ESL programs, oftentimes they have to go out into the community and build their own. Sometimes they have to build their own mental health capabilities and capacity for students. If they're not yet matriculated. So that is a challenge for non-matriculated programs, and a lot of universities have figured that out. And so that's a great thing. But I know that that's often a difficulty for non-credit programs.
Thanks, Don. Well, let's start the conversation with Paul, so we don't run out of time, and we'll come back around if there are ever comments, assuming we still have time before the Q&A. But based on your experience, Paul, what does integrating international students to the campus, to the classroom entail at Montana State University in Billings?
Good question. And I really salute the professionals on this panel. They're coming from a background, a lot of experience in supporting international students. American universities do a really good job of this. Most of us, I think, do. We pay attention not just to the international students, but to our local students as well. Student support, academic success is really key to all institutions in the United States, I would say. So nothing that we do here is out of the ordinary. I think we have an advantage at Montana State University Billings because of our size. So when we look at the number of international students that we are working with, it's a fair number that I can get to know most of the students. We have a small university. I think Dan's point of building allies and champions across the board, whether it's in student affairs or whether it's in academic affairs, faculty, it doesn't matter. Just to make your office really at the heart and center, a connecting point for the international students. As I mentioned in my introduction, our university is right in the downtown of an American city that most international students really don't know about. And I would probably venture to guess most Americans don't know much about either. Billings, Montana is a little bit out of the way, but we use that to our advantage. The community here is very supportive of international students, very supportive of students. So I am proud of my home community here, and I really stress making the connections between our campus and our community to make sure that our students, when they get off the airplane, they are met by a member of our community. Occasionally it's myself, but usually it's somebody who's volunteered to be a host family for the student during their 4 or 5 years that they're here. The host family will drive them to the dormitories, help check them in, and the next day show up and take them shopping. And, over the long breaks that we have for different holidays, they'll invite them home. It creates an off-campus resource that really complements what we're doing on campus with all the stress and all the pressure we have of being students. So those connections to the community are really important outside of just purely academic, affairs inside the classroom.
So this is very interesting because you're referring to these families as host families. And in my previous career working with ESL students, our host families had a different definition. They were actually totally a host family. They were the housing for the students. But I think this idea of having somebody in the community, in a way, adopt them from a distance. They don't have to house them, they don't have to feed them, but they are there to support them. Not only gives the students that feeling of belonging, which is so important, but it allows the community to really be fully engaged. So they buy into the whole idea of why these students are here and how they are an important part of the community. So especially, as you said, in a very American type city that maybe many Americans haven't heard of. So that's an excellent initiative. That's really wonderful to hear that they are willing and actively involved in the orientation of a student and helping them settle into the campus.
It's a great opportunity. We have families, we have barbecues outside. We really get to know. But I also want to stress that, the university, public universities such as Montana State University Billings, part of our mission is really to support the local community. Our local community is very intent on internationalization, just as our university is. So we have a very international citizenry here in Billings, and they're eager. They're very, very eager to support our activities. So it works both ways.
That's really wonderful. That's really how it should be. I mean, no matter what size the city is, you're always able to reach out to the community and find that support and provide that as well experience to them as an extension to, the campus. In terms of faculty training, and we spoke a little bit about faculty training and faculty support in order so they actually have the tools that they need in order to welcome international students into their classroom. What do you do at Montana State University Billings?
We have tried several different strategies. I think one of the most effective is meeting new faculty. We have new faculty orientations across the university. We are invited to participate along with other support units at the university, just to introduce what we do at the university. But then I always use it as a chance to really focus on, what makes international students a little bit different than our local students in terms of language or preparation for American style of pedagogy, academic skills in general. And then open the door, make sure that they have my number and they have all of my colleagues in the office. We're able to meet with them at any time. As Dan has pointed out a few times, the early alert system is really important. It exists in a lot of our universities, our early warning, if a student's getting in trouble at any level, in any sense of the word trouble, the faculty should know about it, and they do know about it. So this is a great opportunity for the faculty to immediately connect with our office, and we're able to provide insight, and I sometimes solve the issues, the ones that we're able to solve. But that orientation for the new faculty is a great opportunity, and then continue on, nurture those relationships with the faculty. So we offer many scholarships and faculty support for their international travel, their international research, their study abroad trips. So we like to be seen as something that's really able to add value to what the faculty are doing here on campus. So it's a good relationship. It's centered on the student. It's really focused on the student's success, but again, building bridges with the faculty. And again, we're small, so our faculty are smaller. I know most of them by name. They know me. We know the students by name. So it's a little bit easier than I would imagine at a larger university like Dawn was speaking about Auburn. I mean, those are quite different dimensions.
I think setting aside a small budget that comes in from international student tuition or recruitment revenue towards faculty exchanges may be a great way to really get full buy-in into the faculty and give them that exposure of, traveling outside, teaching in different setting. So we really have to think about investing in our faculty as much as we want to invest in, recruiting the students and bringing them onto campus. Those would be some things, to really consider in addition to doing the orientation for them on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And we also know all of our universities are full of international faculty, individuals that are really highly qualified. Some of them earn their degrees here in the United States, some earn them abroad, but we make use of these very, very often to work with fellow colleagues in the faculty, but also to support the students. So we have been enriched tremendously by the international faculty.
Yeah, I don't want to run too much longer on the questions, but I would love to hear a little bit about the opportunities you offer in terms of student integration with the community and what has really worked most, in terms of some of your other services that you provide and how they've impacted maybe student success and retention. If you've seen a correlation between some of these activities that you do provide for students in terms of academic support and other community engagement support.
So community engagement is very important. It's one of the three bases of what we try to achieve in the office. I would point out just to a few activities that all universities have: the CPT and the OPT programs. This allows students to have internships, to work off campus. We in our ESL programs require the students to volunteer and really get them placed in local nonprofits or NGOs where they're left alone and they're serving the community, but they're also actualizing their new English skills. Later as an undergraduate or as a postgraduate, working in the community. We have good relationships with businesses in the community through our Career Center as well. So students that are seeking an internship during the summer period or, postgraduate OPT, getting those, we have connections within the community. I think that serves everyone's interest. We are able to use these very talented young people in the city of Billings, but at the same time, the students are having the hands-on approach, the opportunity, to apply their learning in practice. So that's been very good. We have a host of many, many activities, whether it's films or readings or lectures, where we bring the community on campus. We highlight the community, the nations and the countries from where our students come from. That's part of our International Food Festival. We'll get hundreds of people in the community. The students themselves will be making the food. They're very proud of where they came from and where they come from. They want to show off their culture. And people in my community might not know too much about it, but they're very curious and they do want to know. So it's a two-way street. It's a good relationship and it benefits all parties.
That's wonderful. Really, it's some of these events, international food festivals and dance parties, are a great way to showcase cultures and to engage, within the community and make students feel, valued and important, and that they are proud of who they are and where they've come from, and be able to share that with the community is really a big way of integrating them into the whole, larger community in a sense. I wanted to thank you really for all of this insightful information. I know we have a lot more that we could have shared. We'll follow up with some additional information that we can send to the attendees and so on. But I want to make sure we have enough time to answer and address any questions. One of the questions that we had in our Q&A chat was about graduate students. I don't know if any of you would like to take that and answer how that might be different when you're looking at graduate students. Dawn, if you'd like to be the one.
I'll get started anyway, because I'm sure Dan and Paul have a lot to add as well. I think what surprised me when I first started working with international grad students is their age. Some of the countries they go out and they work for 4, 5, 10 years sometimes, and then they go abroad and do a graduate degree. So we worked with a lot of students that were in their late 20s, 30, 32. So they come over an older age. We didn't require them to be part of our housing. It was optional. If they wanted to, they could, whether we were renting apartments off campus or had on-campus housing. And I think in the classroom, they were more sophisticated than the undergraduate students. Of course, you would expect that, particularly with the amount of experience that a lot of them brought. Now, not all of them. Some of them were 22 and just finished a bachelor's program. But so many of them were older. They really did wait to come. So that surprised me. But it was interesting teaching in the classroom because they had a lot that they could offer from the work in their country, and what the workplace was like and the workforce readiness and all of that they had gone through.
Thanks. Anyone else wants to add on?
Yeah, I'll just put a fine point on that. One of a couple of things I think of, in terms of orienting graduate students, and some of this has come from my own research, and that is they're a little, sometimes can be surprised at how little guidance they're given in a graduate program, and I think that really kind of emphasizes the relationship building, and going back to that, building the relationship with the faculty member and asking questions, because I think sometimes there might be an expectation that more of the dots are connected for them, perhaps that where we might do that in an undergraduate program. But I think that's one thing that I've seen, with orienting and continuing to help students at the graduate level. They have to get a sense that they really are there to contribute to the program. And their experiences, the faculty is expecting them to bring their experience and their qualifications to augment the program.
Great. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Just briefly, most of our graduate students are graduates of Montana State University Billings, so they know the university, the community very well. So we use them as yet another means to really connect with some of the newer students that are just arriving in the community, but very sophisticated, and they know what they want. They know what their career looks like. So it's a completely separate profile than our undergraduates.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to put it in the Q&A. And if not, I've got several questions. There's a question just came in the chat. A U.S. citizens graduate student would like to, like that, your guidance started. That's great. So one question I have is really about the role of domestic students in helping with orientation of international students. Frequently, one of the things that make international students feel connected to the campus is really making new friends. And it's not about making other international friends, but making friends with American students. How do you address that? And have you had any initiatives or work around that? Maybe we'll start with Paul this time, and then we'll go to others for comments.
I think that's a great question, and it's so important to immediately make friends with the local community in terms of language acquisition and getting to know the local community. Our students, new students, are living on campus in our residential housing. Generally, they are living pre-COVID. They were living with American students, a local student. Billings has a less than robust public transportation system, so it's really nice to have a local student who has a car that's able to help get them around to different places for their shopping or nightlife or what have you. So, the connection should be really in the hands of the students, and it works out. Generally, it works out really well. It's such a great feeling to see these young people just arrive, living with someone from our community that they like each other, they support each other. They're doing a really important task of integrating these students naturally. I mean, they're just young people making friends.
Anyone else who'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I will, May. Couple of things. We used to hire domestic students as orientation leaders, and so that they would help to support that whole cultural awareness and acquisition when students arrived. We also hired international students as well. We wanted to have a balance and have them see that. So that was one way that they very quickly got to know a domestic student. Another is we had a buddy program, and I can't take any credit for this other than the fact I worked at this organization, but one of our student services advisors had set up a buddy program when she worked at the university before she came into our organization, and she would go out and recruit domestic students to be paired with an international student, and did an incredible job. This grew to 300 or 400 students involved with it. And they would get to this big reveal. She would get all their background information and pair them up, and then do this big reveal party, and then ask them to meet at least once a week to do something together, study together, go to dinner, go to events. It was a fabulous, fabulous program. A lot of relationships came out of that, by the way, as well too. But it was just a really good program. It was a fabulous way to integrate. I know one of the universities I worked with said that, we have a pathway program on campus, not because we need the money, but because we want these international students to be part of our campus. We don't have enough right now. And so we want this to happen. We want this integration. And so they would support these type of programs that we were doing to help integrate the students, knowing that most of the students on campus were not probably going to go abroad as a student anyway, and really wanted that integration. But that buddy program was very powerful and it went all year. They would do social events for just the buddies and dances on Sunday nights and so forth. Great program.
Thanks. We have some overseas attendees with us today. And there is a question somebody's asking, and I'll ask Paul if he can address it. The person is saying they're curious to know if there is a state or national requirements to follow up on international student graduate outcomes. And if so, how do you retain a connection with international grads? So I think it's really two different questions. I mean, in the US, there's very little national probably requirements, but Paul, please give us your insight on this. It's in the Q&A if you want to see it.
Well, I think in terms of following up on outcomes, this is a general process of continuous quality assurance at the university. So our graduate school, our graduate programs themselves have a model of assessment that they use for all students, whether they're international or they're local students. I don't have a lot of details on that, but in many ways, international students are just students. I really like to emphasize that they're students. They're going through many of the same things that we went through when we were students, whether we studied in our hometown or we, traveled across the country. That's a big issue. The second part of the question was, I forget.
How do you retain a connection with international grads? But that's really more around alumni engagement. And one of the questions I was going to ask kind of around alumni engagement is that, do you use your alums to engage them in orientation of students prior to departure from their country? So it's both really, it's all about alumni engagement. Both do you track them and you keep track, you keep up with them, and you get them involved and integrate them in some of these services that you offer to incoming students?
Yeah, we do. We try. Ideally, we really make use of the alumni in country to help with our onboarding of students. The numbers are quite small depending on the country, but in terms of the students, the graduate students with the alumni, we have through my Office of International Studies, we're really in touch with our students as they graduate, and using some of these social media platforms, we've been able to develop our own associations, really loosely based associations, just to follow up and to make sure that we're providing services to the students as they graduate, and just keeping in touch as they mature and they grow. For all of us in higher education, that's one of the best outcomes, is just seeing a young person achieve the success that they sought through education, and staying in touch with them as they progress through their careers and their lives. So sometimes it's just an organic process of staying in touch because we like each other. The Alumni Association has their own formal process of tracking the alums at graduate school.
And that's actually a very important topic that I hope we will be able to address in the next few months, or maybe not next event, but in future events. So keep an eye on, some of our future events that will come up. But I think alumni engagement in itself is a whole topic that we can spend about an hour on, and the benefits of it and why, and what are those benefits and things like that. But as we approach the conclusion of our first Think-in session, I'd like to thank all of our guests and our speakers for taking the time to join us today. And we hope that this knowledge sharing will add immense value to the strategies that you're preparing to benefit your students and your institutions. I'd like to emphasize this crucial element of international student education. I hope that would be one of the main takeaways with you. And we spoke a lot about this, and it's really student support services, student retention activities, and how important those in ensuring that we are here to serve our students that we recruit to campus. International students face many challenges. Any one of them may be subject to the cultural shock, homesickness, and feeling of isolation. And to top all of these, our recent issues of the pandemic and the isolation that this has created, it really has not been easy, not only for the international students, but also for our domestic students. We all probably have or know somebody who's graduated during the pandemic without graduation ceremonies and other things like that. So the effect of the pandemic has really been great. So it's really important to be connected to the students and ensure that these students are supported as they go through their journey and that they persist through graduation. It's inspiring to see really many of these students going through their academic journey, and even with the difficulties of being thousands of miles away from home. It's really never easy. There's a lot of sacrifice that is done by the students and their families, but we want to make sure that we are, again, there to support them and ensure that we don't lose any of them in early termination of their studies because of issues that could have been prevented. It's really critical for us to deliberate in our efforts in integrating our international students into the classroom as we start educating them in the next normal. We want to be always, sharing this information, looking at new approaches, and sharing the best practices and how we can improve the retention, and looking beyond the quantity and more focusing on the quality of what we do. More than focusing on bolstering recruitment of international numbers to hit our targets, we need to exert as much energy, effort, really, in ensuring that our global learners will remain in their degree programs until graduation. At MSM, we support our partner extension strategies early on in the recruitment process. Agents are trained, agents and our staff are trained critically to intentionally assess leads of global learners to ensure that they will stay on and that they are able to manage the acculturation and the adjustments in a new country. As our overseas satellite offices, as we set up our satellite offices for our partner institutions, our in-country staff and our partner student agent recruitment agencies are always equipped with the tools that they need to provide student counseling to mentally prepare them and support them. And beyond managing communications and sharing admission requirements, travel papers, and accommodation needs, our trained staff and agents support and empower global learners by helping them navigate their way through new culture in their chosen new study destination. Additionally, MSM provides its partner institutions helpful cultural training sessions so that they may understand international students better, regardless of the country of origin. These training sessions are available to all of our institutional partners, to their faculty, to the staff, whenever required and whenever requested of us. These discussions equip them to identify patterns in student engagements and performance as to intervene early on when students face difficulties. Our bigger and deeper mission goes beyond recruitment. We must provide the long-term, sincere support to our global learners so that they can empower, so we can empower them through their academic journey. I wanted to thank you once again for joining us today, and especially to our speakers with all of the insightful information that they share with us. And I wish all of you the best in this fall semester as we all try to bounce back to the new normal. Have a wonderful day, and we're just a minute from concluding. If there's any last comments from the speakers, I would love to hear from you.
Thank you, May. Thank you.
No, thank you
everyone.
for coming. Thank you for attending and asking great questions. And so appreciate having you all here.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.